you taking the IELTS speaking test anytime soon? If the answer is yes, you're in the right place today, because we're going to go through 7 more of my favourite tips for IELTS speaking task 2. If you haven't seen my first video where I went for another 6 points, I'm going to put the link up here. Otherwise, let's get stuck in. My name's Rob and I'm a full-time teacher of British English based in England, and on this channel, My English Teacher Rob, we're all about helping you to become more fluent and confident in English. So if you found this video useful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down here before you go and click on notifications bell so that you can find out when I upload new videos. Let's get stuck in. Tip number 1 is to speak about things that you know. I get asked quite a lot of the time, can I invent the answer if I can't think of an example? And in principle, if you read the band descriptors and the literature from Cambridge, there's nothing in there to say that you can't invent it. It is an English test after all, and you're mainly being tested on your fluency, your vocabulary, your grammar, and your pronunciation. So there's no reason why you can't invent the answer. You won't lose marks for that specifically, but consider what you're actually saying there. For most people, trying to create an answer from scratch, that means from nothing, invent it out of thin air, that's going to be challenging for most people to do in their own language. Now, speaking a second language is one of the most challenging things we can ask of ourselves, and you're telling me that you're going to invent a story on top of that in the foreign language. It's just going to make the test that little bit more difficult for you, and you've already got enough to manage. So as far as possible, I strongly suggest that you focus on something that you know about. Find a way to talk about something that you do know about, or relate it to something known, because you're always going to feel more comfortable and more confident and find it easier to express ideas about things that you're familiar with. So, for example, if the question asks you to talk about a movie that you've seen recently at the cinema, and you haven't seen a movie recently at the cinema, describe your favourite movie, or describe a movie that you remember, and describe it as though you saw it recently. You know, you can get a bit creative in that respect. Point number 2 is to sound interested in what you're saying. Now, I know that a lot of these exams take place on Saturday morning, and there's probably a million places you would rather be on a Saturday morning than sat in an exam room with an examiner talking in a foreign language about something. You know, some of those topics are a bit dry, right? Let's be honest. But let's not make the situation worse by speaking like a robot in one tone of voice. More to the point, if you're using expressive adjectives that are very emotional, like amazing and fantastic, make sure you're putting emotion into them. So instead of saying, I saw a movie at the cinema last week and it was amazing and it had fantastic special effects, say, I saw a movie just last week at the cinema. It was amazing. The special effects were fantastic. Put a bit of effort into it and wake the examiner up a little bit. While you won't lose any marks for sounding bored, let's remember that pronunciation is 1/4 of the marks. So being emphatic in the right places and having good intonation is part of speaking good English. This kind of leads into tip number 3, which is to use positive body language. In other words, sit up straight, face forward, make eye contact with the examiner, but don't stare at them. Place the palms of your hands on the tops of your knees and keep them there. You've got to practice this before the exam. I've seen lots of students slouching, lying down on the couch when they've had lessons with me, or they're cupping their face in their hands, or maybe they've got, this is a bad one, if you cross your arms like this, because this is actually closing you off to the examiner. This is very negative body language. How do you feel now as I'm crossing my arms? It's probably not good, right? So don't do that. There have actually been studies carried out that prove that when you use negative body language, you actually become less receptive to information, and you actually don't project your personality as well. The body language that you use can fully affect your physical response to the situation, just as it can the person who you're communicating with. So really pay attention to this. Tip number 4 is to consider the whole card read every part of the task before you decide on which example you're going to speak about. This is really important because this will help you to keep on topic. I know this might sound really obvious, but I hear a lot of students answering the question, and it becomes clear that even though they've read the whole card, they start speaking about only the first line, which says describe something. They only describe the first line. You must speak about those 4 points that are on the card and include them in your answer. The reason they give you a minute before you begin speaking is to read the card carefully and make a decision for each one of those points about what you're going to say. If you have to make decisions about those points while you're in the middle of speaking, this could introduce breaks into your fluency, which is going to bring your mark down. Number 5. Tip number 5 is to practice generating ideas for a wide variety of Task 2 topics. Something I hear really often from you guys is I can't think of anything to say about the topic that they give me on the card in the exam. This is something that you can practice before you go into the exam. Take a wide selection of topics from different subject areas, look at the points, and just practice the planning stage itself. Take out a pen and a piece of paper and write down as many ideas as you can. You can take longer than a minute for this if you're doing it as preparation. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use all of those ideas in the exam. It just means that you've practiced expanding a topic, taking it to its outer limits, and on exam day you will be better at generating ideas in a minute having practiced it before. The goal here is to have more ideas than we really need so that we have no trouble reaching 2 minutes, and so we don't have to stop to think of what to say next while we're in the middle of the exam. Point number 6 is to consider carefully the tenses and the context of the question that you've been given. If the question is asking you about a journey that you remember really well, it's asking you about something that happened in the past. So you shouldn't be describing that experience in the present, but this is what I hear a lot of students doing. This is something, again, that you're going to have to practice before you go in, but do consider it and be careful, especially if you're in a language that uses tenses in a very different way to how we do in English, such as Chinese. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to think so much about vocabulary and grammar on exam day. Our ultimate goal is to be able to focus fully on simply answering the topic that we've been given, because we should have already done all the vocabulary and grammar practice and all the thinking before we go in for the test. So do practice this as much as you can before exam day. Last but not least, tip number 7 is to practice every single day leading up to the exam with real Task 2 questions that you've taken from Cambridge textbooks. And if you can, record yourself answering them. It doesn't have to be like a fancy get-up like this, just use your phone. The point here is that you're trying to get the perspective of the examiner. You're trying to see all those weird body mannerisms, those, you know, if you're waving your hands around like this is what I do. You guys don't see this because I cut this out of the video. Let's face it, Task 2 of the speaking test on IELTS is a little bit strange. If one of your friends came up to you and gave you a question on a card and said, I want you to speak about this topic for 2 minutes and include these 4 points, you'd look at them like, really? That's a bit strange, isn't it? The first time you brushed your teeth or tied your shoelaces, that was probably a bit strange as well. The reason that it feels so natural today and that you are able to do those things without even thinking about it is because you do them every single day. It's become second nature, it's just habit. We want to get to that stage with speaking Task 2, and you're only going to get to that stage if you do just like you do with brushing your teeth, I hope, and do it every single day. You're building up your muscle memory so that you feel less nervous when you're asked to answer the task. I can always tell the students who've practiced Task 2 from those who haven't, because when I give them the task, they either look at it and they become very, very nervous straight away, or they kind of feel relaxed and they just snap into it and they just get on and do it. Practicing the questions every single day enables you to build up your muscle memory so that it's like a trained response. When you go in on exam day, you just snap into exam mode and do it without having to think about it. You're also training yourself to recognize 2 minutes if you've spoken for too long or too little. The point of recording yourself is so that you can see what the examiner will see. So if you're not happy with the sound of your voice, if you're not happy with your mannerisms, today's question, what's the best advice that you would give to somebody for speaking part 2? Put your answers in the comments below. This is the My English Teacher Rob channel, where we're all about helping you to become more fluent and confident in English. If you found this video useful, hit the subscribe button below, turn on notifications so that you'll find out when I upload new material, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.